Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 315 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. We are here live in our virtual studios. I'm here with a couple of my co-hosts, starting with Wendy. Wendy, what are you drinking over there?
I have an Alchemist Crusher, and not to be outdone by my fellow hosts, I think I will follow that up with a Focal Banger.
And Dan, what about you?
So went back to the old usual because I'm doing some things right now. So I've got the vodka soda, but this one looked good enough that I do have to make an exception. I've got a luscious Imperial Stout.
Drinking those high gravity beers at, is it 4 p.m. over there for you?
It's 4 p.m.
Well, for me, I have got from the Alchemist a nice can of Dark, as well as a can of the Skadoosh, which we'll be talking about later. But if you guys couldn't tell, it's been a minute since we've had basically everyone drinking the same brewery's beer. Today, we have the Alchemist in our studio. Why don't you guys introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and what you guys do at the Alchemist.
Thanks for having us. I'm Jen Kimmich. I am the co-founder, co-owner of the Alchemist. Call myself CEO, but John and I really work side by side in the office here, overseeing everything at this point.
Yeah. I'm John Kimmich, co-owner, head brewer at the Alchemist.
And importantly, what are you drinking?
Jen's drinking her go-to everyday beer, Focal Banger. And I'm starting with the Donovan's Red.
What is the Donovan's Red? That's not one of the beers you sent us.
No, I couldn't send you all.
That's
I had to choose
all right.
6 to send you. Donovan's Red is a beer that was one of the original 4 everyday 365-day-a-year beers at the pub. So the original Alchemist Pub and Brewery, which was in downtown Waterbury, for people that don't know, from November of 2003 until August of 2011, when it was destroyed by Tropical Storm Irene. So Donovan's Red was, one of those beers that in 2003 was kind of a bridge for a lot of people, because when we started up, it was a different landscape, and we had no idea how people were going to respond to my IPAs. And Donovan's Red is a relatively hoppy red ale, and it's delicious.
It is.
Well, I was actually on your web or your YouTube page earlier today, and if you guys go to the Alchemist Beers YouTube page, you could see a lot of beer reviews, including introductions into, I guess you would call it the Skadoosh series, which talks about all the beers. So what version of Skadoosh do we have here, and what can you tell us about it?
Well, what we sent you, so that was packaged Wednesday morning. Today is Friday. So that is Skadoosh 83, extremely young, super fresh. That is, so for the last 4 iterations of Skadoosh, I've been playing around with a new hop out of Willamette Valley in Oregon. Our friends Ben and Cindy of B&D Hop Farms, they are one of, I think, 4 or 5 local hop growers that I forget the name of their organization. I should remember it. But they are developing varieties that thrive in their specific climate. So they're trying to find something that's unique, that is for them, that's disease resistant, high yield, and awesome. And one of the first 2 that they've come out is this hop called 2B. So it hasn't really been named yet. It's still got that number and letter classification. And so I've been pairing that up with different varieties throughout these last 4 Skadoosh, just to see what does 2B love and what does it not love. And we're narrowing it down. So that one is Mosaic in 2B.
Before the show, we were talking and I was telling you that I'm not a big fan of IPAs, and you said it's because you don't drink our IPAs or the IPAs from New England, I think. And I have to tell you what, this beer is extremely, for someone who's not a big fan of the piney, the bitter, the punch you in the face beer, like I'm getting all, some type of fruit in there, a little bit of pine, delicious. I actually love it. Dan, you would like this too, so I think you should definitely drink this while it's fresh.
Okay.
For sure.
Well, yeah, that Skadoosh in particular, that 83, Mosaic is a hit because of what it is, but there's something about it. I don't think it's the best friend with 2B. It's nice in there, but it just kind of buries 2B, and it's hard. They don't really work well. That Mosaic just is dominating it. There have been some others that were much more successful, but that's still a delicious beer.
Well, I feel like you wouldn't put it out if it wasn't up to your standards, for sure. So go check out their YouTube page, where you could see a little bit of history of some of the beers that they have created. Jen, I wanted to bring you into the conversation because I actually was extremely enamored with one of your talks that you did during the Female Founder Speaker Series. And one thing that really struck my mind is that you said you made a commitment to your community and your employees early on, which in the restaurant industry, even in the brewery industry, turnover is extremely high. It's just natural for the industry. What were those commitments that you were making at that time for your staff and your community? And what are you kind of doing today in 2023?
Gosh, well, over the course of 20 years, what we've done is certainly evolved and expanded. I can say early on, we really were broke when we opened The Alchemist. We had spent all of our money opening this place. We found out we were pregnant the day after we opened. But right away, we were successful. We knew if we worked hard and made the best food we can, and John was making his great beer, that we'd be successful. And we were, strumming along. And as soon as we could afford it, we got ourselves health insurance. And then we started to add on employees. We would do little things, but the focus was always professionalizing jobs, especially service industry jobs that just hadn't been professionalized before. So as soon as we could, we got our dishwashers and our prep cooks on salary. We gave people paid time off. And we really invested in our employees. Today, we do so much more. We have a full-time wellness director. We have acupuncture here at The Alchemist. We have, stocked kitchens. We do so much. We have 401k, health insurance. But I think what matters is every business, you start out small and you do what you can do. And you put your best foot forward. And, that's the same thing we did with our community. Early on, we couldn't make big donations, but we always welcomed groups in. We always provided a safe space for everyone. And, those early investments are really what got us through some really tough times, from, the financial disaster of the tens to, the flood that we experienced in 2011. And then most recently during COVID, it's these investments that we made that really made us more resilient and easier to spin and make changes when we needed to and get through tough times. And I have one really good example of that. One of the investments that we made towards our environmental initiatives was just shortly before COVID, and that was installing a CO2 reclamation system. We all know that, breweries were struggling to get CO2 during COVID. We heard of local breweries shutting down. We didn't have to worry about that. So it's those kind of investments in the environment and the community and your staff that really make you strong when times are tough.
Yeah, and that CO2 reclamation, that was that first was conceived by our desire to do something with the greenhouse gas that our fermenters were producing every week. So it's just kind of crazy for all the environmental things we do, and here we are, jacking CO2 into the atmosphere. So that was like the big motivator, but it was the foresight of the first rumors of CO2 being an issue. So it was that connection of environmental drive being combined with good business sense, which was how can we protect ourselves when there are shortages?
Yeah. And, today we take such great pride in the fact that we're a certified B Corp. And not only us, but our entire team takes such great pride in it. And, we have business owners, brewery owners ask us all the time, do you make your money back from environmental work, from investing in your employees? And we say, it's not about the money. We don't do this because we're good people. It's good for the bottom line. So everything we do is good for the bottom line.
It's good for the bottom line, but it's also, we've made many expenditures that if we were the kind of business that had investors that were only looking at the bottom line, they might never have happened. There's the other side of Jen's statement, which is we see the value in what we call the right thing to do, and we stick to it. And a lot of businesses would be like, we can't afford to do that. Well, it's like, well, sure, you can. It's going to hurt a little more. It's going to take you longer to pay it off. But if you're doing something because you think it's the right thing to do, generally it becomes, it is the wise business decision, because generally those two things kind of go together, Reinvesting in your people, in your business, worrying about your environmental impact, those end up paying off. I mean, we all see it as time marches on.
Well, I spent a lot of time perusing through your website and going over all of those, your mission statement and all the things you've been talking about. And I was really impressed because the more I researched, the more I realized that it wasn't just something you threw up on the website. It's actually, you're living by that. And I was really impressed by that. So I'm going to fangirl a little bit over it. I'm a volunteer at heart, so I love all the stuff that you do for your community. One thing is that it's not like Vermont is really known for its diversity. How difficult has it been to make diversity, inclusion, and inclusivity a focus of your business?
Yeah. Well, I think Vermont is a very white state, but like every state in the country, it's changing quickly. But we also live in a resort town. So we have people from all over the world come here. So, with our anti-racist plan, one of the things that we're focused on is just building a more welcoming community. It's not about politics. It's not about anything other than making people feel welcome. And that's what we're really focused on. We're investing in music events, arts, things that just provide exposure. And we're really excited about that. And then we also do partner with Black organizations in Vermont too, to help build a more inclusive Vermont. So, no matter how white or how Black a state is, you can still work towards inclusivity. There are all sorts of things you can do, and we're committed to that.
And I feel like sometimes people hear a statistic like that Vermont's the whitest state in the union. And, statistically, it probably, believe it still is. But I feel like that kind of glosses over this pretty sizable part of our population of brown people, of immigrants that are here because they're desperately trying to support their families back from where they come from. And I feel like a lot of these communities are so quickly overlooked, and quite frankly, that's some of the things that we deal with as a business, and trying to open people's eyes to that. And take your blinders off, because like Jen said, demographic is changing rapidly everywhere, and it is difficult, and boy, everybody deserves to be welcome. So yeah,
absolutely. And as far as our workplace policies go and building a more inclusive workplace, for us, we've always focused on a diverse workplace and not so much color of skin, because that is really hard in Vermont. So we have a lot of people of different intellectual abilities, people on the spectrum. We have people in wheelchairs,
All ranges of education.
All ranges of education, socioeconomic backgrounds. You don't have to have a college degree to work here. We have a lot of employees that don't have high school degrees, and we provide training. So that's kind of how we think about diversity here.
So the next question that I have is kind of personal, I guess. One of the things that I kind of focus on is weird laws in different states. And at that talk that Ken was talking about for the that he saw in the video, Jen, you had said something about you were just getting ready to increase your distribution, and the state came in and said that you needed to shut down your retail store. And I'm not aware of that story, so I was just kind of curious as to what the background on that was.
Yeah, that's just I think that's a little snippet of a story. I think that comes when we opened our first production brewery in Waterbury,
which we still operate.
We still operate. We have a production brewery where we make Heady Topper in Waterbury, and then we have this brewery here in Stowe. We had started planning for the opening of that brewery in January of 2011, and we had sunk all of our money into it from the pub, and we were just flat out broke again. And right when the flood came and destroyed our pub, the next day our first cans rolled off the line. So it was kind of like a small miracle for us. So we started, just brewing right away. Because we had lost our pub and because we had to lay off 20 people immediately, we doubled down and increased production as quick as we could at that new brewery. And we tripled production the first 6 months so that we were able to hire back half of our staff. Well, unbeknownst to us, that had triggered some new water discharge permits that we didn't have to have prior to increasing our production. And, we were just... Honestly, we were a little in shock from the flood. We were in survival mode, and we were surviving, and we were getting those jobs back. So when the state came in and said, hey, you have to get these discharge permits in place. You don't have sufficient parking here to have these people come in and buy beer. You have to shut down. There were a number of reasons, but
there were, and it was, people ask us, we've had many people be like, boy, after the end of an interview, they're like, you two should write a book. And it's like, well, in our free time, we'll write a book. But that in those days, especially, I can't speak everywhere, but here, especially because that's our experience, there is no manual on how to do this. Like it was some of the early people doing these things and growing like that. And so we were really blind going into it because, for 9 years it was our pub, and we knew that. And then we expanded into a new industry, which was production brewing, and increased production. And then, it just starts to trigger things. It's not like, hey, page 7 tells you if you go start making 3,000 barrels a year, then you need a direct discharge permit with the state. There's nothing like that. And so just knock, 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 they show up at your door and like, hey, you don't have a direct discharge permit. And you're like, a direct discharge, what? So there was so much of that over the years. We went to school on how to open a business when we opened our first business, and we still continue to learn all kinds of new lessons all the time. But that's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah. But, in addition to that flood coming and us losing our employees overnight like that, we were just a little tiny brew pub, 60-seat brew pub. And we had this little new brewery that we were going to open up 1,500 barrels a year. When that all happened, this Heady Topper craze happened all at the same time. So when we did start selling 4-packs, people were parking on Route 100. People were lining up for beer. It was so much more than we ever anticipated or frankly could really handle. And, our neighbor was literally out in his front yard with a shotgun because he couldn't stand all the people turning around in his driveway. It was something. It was
fun.
It was
good times.
People think this was all, at the time it was a blur because it was all being thrown at us and people are going crazy for Heady Topper. And at the same time, people were saying this was all deliberate, like we were deliberately not making enough beer and driving up demand. And it's like, seeing how crazy we were at that time, and with an 8-year-old in tow, it was a crazy time.
So we opened up the most beer I ever made in Waterbury at the pub was about 420 barrels a year. That was like our maximum production
For 8 years.
So then when we opened the production brewery, we opened up with a capacity of 1,500 barrels a year, thinking maybe we'll sell it out of our pub, and if we have extra, I don't know, we just kind of, and so the flood hit, we took the emergency funds and doubled our production to 3,000. 3 months later, we took every bit of money we had made again, bumped it up to 6,000. And then the next bump, it took us, I think, 6 months to get from 6,000 to 9,000. And that was maximum capacity for the building. And yeah, it's from a business point of view, you're just charging forward and you're making major decisions on the fly and doing everything you can to keep like 1,000 balls up in the air all at once.
So real quick, before we move on to talking about the beer, which I'm sure the guys are anxious to do that, I'm curious then, what would be one piece of advice that you would give a young brewer coming up?
A young brewer?
About starting a business, I would say.
Or any business. I think, what we always say is work lots of jobs, work for whatever business you want to get in, work jobs in that field, see how to do things and not how to do things, work every job hard and do it as well as you can. And, when you do your projections and you really think about your business and you put your projections out and you do your pro formas and you're figuring out how much money you're going to make, don't shoot for the moon. I mean, plan for a rainy day, put those slow days in, plan to sell not as much beer or whatever you're making as you think you're going to, because you really need to have a break even that's achievable. We just see so many businesses go out of business. They think they, are going to make so much beer and they're going to sell so much. And for us, it's been a really slow journey. We've taken our time and, it's been worth it.
And yeah, my addition to that answer would be, and it's crazy. It's crazy when things like this start coming out of my mouth because I'm 51, which is a total mind fuck. But I still feel like I'm 22, and so what I've witnessed over the years and in the last 15 years, I see a lot of entrepreneurial young people, which is really cool. Because now in college, entrepreneurship is a thing. When I was in college, I took some small business classes, but it was very corporately oriented. It wasn't like it is now. I see the mistake that a lot of young people make is they think they're going to smash it out of the park when they're 24. Maybe some of them do, but by and large, your 20s are when you should just, like Jen said, just work. Just shut up and work 2 jobs at a time. You should be working your brains out and don't float job to job necessarily, because even a shitty job has a tremendous amount to teach you. People underestimate what you can learn from a bad boss and a bad situation, because you learn what you don't want to do if you ever are in that position. And we had good bosses and we had bad bosses over the year, and you learn from all of them. And Jen was 30, I was 31 when we were able to finally scrap together funding and equipment and used equipment and a location and open that pub and brewery. I think a lot of times people just want it too quick.
Yeah.
And they're not willing to sacrifice. Like literally, here we are. We own 2 production breweries. We are certainly very successful in the world of craft beer, but we have no investors. We have no other owners, no outside interest, because every time we did something, we went for it. It was very pragmatic. It was very thoughtful and planned out, but we put everything on the line. When we started that pub, we signed away the meager things that we had gathered at that point. When we started the production brewery in Waterbury, We signed over everything, the pub, everything we had built for 9 years. We put it all on the line again. When we built this place in Stowe, we leveraged that Waterbury brewery. So here we are now with the beautiful position of being able to mold our business in whatever way we see fit. There's nobody influencing our business, just us. And that takes sacrifice and hard work and time.
It's awesome. Dan?
All right. So, John, first off, thank you. This is an amazing beer. I'm drinking this Luscious right now.
That's a favorite.
Very good. It doesn't taste like it's 9.2. I wish I had more. So just so the afternoon here.
Gone already?
No, it's about 2/3 gone though.
Yeah.
So I wish I had more. Anyways, so you are known as the creator of the New England IPA. One of the beers that I hate more than anything in life. Sorry, I hate to say it, but it's true. Ken's not far behind me. What are your opinions about the New England IPA scene today? Because when it comes to Heady Topper, and Ken can tell me what episode we tried it on, it's probably in the single digits, maybe the really low double digits. We had a former host bring a can on. Both of us were kind of like, there's not really much to it. When people at the time, especially, that would have been around 2015, were losing their minds. So it's not really a beer I consider a New England IPA, but what do you think about the current New England IPA situation? I mean, everyone has like 9 of them, it feels like, and a lot of them are basically like orange juice, in my opinion. Just talk to us about your views on that, if you could.
Sure, but I could probably fill 3 hours of time talking.
Oh boy.
When I first started professionally brewing, mid 90s at the Vermont Pub and Brewery, learning my craft from our departed friend Greg Noonan, and learning how to properly brew beer, that groundwork. That is when he trusted me to give me a bit of free reign. That's when I really started pushing things there and pushing the boundaries and seeing what our customers would gravitate toward. And I knew what my taste gravitated toward, and I wanted to see if other people agreed with me. Throughout the many years, that has proven to be true for certain. So when, as Heady Topper, when I first crafted the first beers that were available at the pub, Holy Cow IPA was one of them. And that was kind of the first shot across the bow to see what people were going to be ready for. 5% IPA. I didn't want to go nuts, at the time in those years. I mean, that was what people kind of expected around here. But it was certainly more bold and hop forward than anything available. When I saw how that was received, that was kind of like immediately like, all right, the gloves are off. I can basically do anything I want. So about 6 weeks later, Heady Topper made its debut at the pub. One of the stories I like to tell a lot about that is we had a regular we still are friends with them. He only drank screwdrivers when he came to the Alchemist for the first 8 weeks we were open. Other beer, he was like, no, I don't know, Vermonter. And Heady Topper was the one. Heady Topper turned him into a beer drinker, and he never really looked back at those cocktails. So we recognized that ability to present the public's palates with something very different from what they expected, and that they were embracing our ideas of what these beers should taste like. So in those early years of brewing it, if you go back, and you could probably still go through the archives on a place like Beer Advocate, which was like the first place where people were really putting public reviews up on there. And they had 5 criteria, and one of them was appearance. Consistently, Heady Topper would get like 1s on appearance, and then 4s, 5s, everything else on all the other things. And it was just, sure, it could be annoying at times, but it was also understandable because people just hadn't really experienced that before. And it was one, like the first example of many examples of when we have had to train, for lack of a better word, the public at large what we were doing and what they were tasting. So, people would just tear Heady Topper apart, say, oh, it looks terrible, so hazy. And we would just laugh and be like, okay, whatever, you're missing out, because we knew. And so in those early years, we would enter Heady into Great American Beer Festival, and it would get tossed out right away all the time because it was hazy. It seems like overnight, the switch flipped. We started packaging Heady Topper, and for the very first time, you were able to take our beer to go someplace else. So you didn't have to come and sit at the bar or in our restaurant to get our beer. That was the first time ever. We never did growlers. We never did to-go beer, nothing. So it was almost overnight that brewers that had been coming for years into our pub and being influenced by the beers that I was brewing, they take that, and of course, the natural instinct of any young brewer or old brewer is like, oh, well, if they're doing this, more is better. And so they started veering off in a different direction. There is another very excellent brewer that started specifically making their beers softer, leaning into calcium chloride to soften the palate of the IPA. And as a natural result of that then spawned that bigger, more is better in a totally different direction. And Heady Topper was once again an outlier. The world of New England IPA and hazy IPA split into what I consider just a terrible, terrible direction. The world is absolutely rotten with chalky, soft, basically undrinkable IPAs and double IPAs, in my opinion. They lose the structure. They lose everything that makes an IPA amazing, in my opinion. They have de-emphasized bitterness to the detriment of the overall beer. I think you are now starting to see a turning in the market. You are seeing a lot of experienced drinkers, not that they have any real knowledge above anybody else, but they've tried enough beers now that their palate is being fatigued by these overly, muddy, murky, overly hopped, undrinkable IPAs that, quite frankly, are ruining, wasting hops by the thousands and hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. And it's morphed into something that is not really at all what we do. So Heady Topper used to be in between this and that, and English IPAs and West Coast IPAs. Now it still sits in between. It's not West Coast. It's not New England. It is its own thing. And that is what we take great pride in. We are targeting very classic, ingrained attributes that people are drawn to in a beverage. And it is kind of a timeless flavor that, I can't imagine ever not enjoying the kind of IPA that we brew.
It literally was overnight where people were saying, why is this beer so hazy, to why isn't it hazier? Why aren't
not hazy enough?
Why it's not hazy enough? And really, people thought that we were doing something intentional with the beer. Never. It was just a natural hop haze, and then people started throwing everything in their beer to make it hazy.
Well, sure. Brewers are putting applesauce in the kettle. They still, to this day, you look at ingredient lists on New England IPAs, and they're putting oats. Come on.
Yeah. And you said earlier that you really hate IPA, or you don't like IPA, you don't care for it. And then you drank the Skadoosh and you said, this is actually okay.
That was me.
That was Ken. That was Ken.
Right. You said, this is actually okay. But
I said I don't like New England IPAs. I don't mind a West Coast. So
right. Point taken. But and none of our beers are soft and chalky. They all have that good mineral backbone, that just, the crisp finish.
And that's what quite often makes West Coast IPAs a delight to drink at times. Again, not all are created equal, but when you're drinking an excellent West Coast IPA, it's got all that structure that presents those hops to your palate and makes it a pleasant experience. Quite often, you shouldn't taste a beer and then it just goes poof in your mouth and then plummets down the back of your throat with astringency and tastes like you just chewed up Tums and baby aspirin.
And the coating of the tongue and the residual sugar.
Yeah, I agree with you, but thank you very much for that. That was a great explanation about all of that. Just want to pivot a little bit. Again, go into one of your non-IPAs here, such as a stout. I noticed you have done some barrel aging in the past. One thing that caught my eye is you did a port barrel-aged milk stout. First off, if you can remember or have details about that, tell us about how that came about, and tell us about your barrel aging program in general, if you could.
Well, it's interesting, too, because, we've had such a strange trajectory. When, for 9 years at the pub, I had 12 different beers on tap every day, cask conditioned through imperial stouts, sours, lagers. I mean, you name it. And so overnight, people went from that to us only having Heady Topper for well over a year. And it was amazing that coincided with the explosion of the ability to access Heady Topper. And so all these new people were trying Alchemist beer. And how many of them, as we started releasing other beers, they're like, oh, we didn't know you made anything other than Heady Topper. And it showed us just how short people's memories are and how quickly you move into a new era of customers. You have customers now. 10 years from now, we're going to have some of those customers for sure, but we're going to have totally new customers that we feel like we are constantly like explaining to people like what we do. Still to this day, people will be surprised when they come in here and there are 6 different sour beers available and stuff like that. And not kettle soured garbage, but true barrel aged 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 1-year-old, like traditional gooses and fruit aged sours and all kinds of different things. So that has been going on since the pub days. I mean, it started with 2 barrels in the basement that got washed away in the flood. When we built the Waterbury Brewery, we've now, I now have 28 barrels over the last 12 years that have been fine-tuned and eliminated and replaced until I have 28 outstanding barrels of sour beer. When I bring barrels in for imperial stouts and stuff like that, you source them and they come and go. So the beer you're talking about is Knuckle Dragger. It's a milk stout, an imperial milk stout aged in tawny port barrels. That came about through experimentation, like with most breweries. Back in probably 2016, maybe, an imperial stout called Squidgy Black was aged partially in bourbon barrels, Madeira barrels, and port barrels, and then blended and created this beer. So as I'm making imperial stouts and tasting imperial stouts and different ingredients that bring different flavors to the forefront, as you drink Luscious, you'll notice a definite lack of that black acrid character. What I was shooting for with a beer like Luscious, a British imperial stout, I want to accentuate that dark dried fruit character. I want to accentuate those cocoa flavors, the chocolate flavors, without any acrid kind of burnt character to the beer. I want it to be luscious. I want it to be lush on your palate. Yet at the same time, you can drink a full 16-ounce can of that, never guess that it's 9.2%. And when you're done with it, you might be tempted to pick up another of the same thing and drink another can of that. So that, to me, that's an accomplishment. That's a great beer. You don't even think about it. You just keep drinking it and all of a sudden it's empty. And you're like, wow, that was a great beer. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to tear it apart. So some of these flavors that are developed by the malts that I use in my stouts lend themselves to that. So the first time you try a beer out of a Madeira barrel and you get that nutty marzipan almond flavor from the Madeira, or the first time you try a beer out of a tawny port barrel and you get those dark dried fruit, the plums, figs, and all of that kind of raisiny flavor. For me, I mean, that just gets my brain turning and strategizing how I'm going to put these flavors together into something final. So for Knuckle Dragger, it was driven out of the malt bill, which will promote some of those flavors of the dried fruit, which then when you draw out that tawny port character, I mean, come on, it's a nice beer.
I wish I had a chance to try it, because the whole reason I brought it up, I've had a port barrel aged stout once or twice over the last few years, and it's always good. It's not something you would think of off the top of your head if you're going to barrel age something, but every time I've seen it done, it does come out amazing. Now, one more question. I'm going to pass it back over to Ken here. I'm curious about this. So apparently Sierra Nevada Bigfoot was the inspiration for Heady Topper. Is that correct? And can you tell us about that?
It's funny how things get taken out of context, isn't it?
Oh, boy.
That was about maybe a year ago. I forget who it was that reached out, some magazine, and they wanted to know a classic beer that's still around that has history that I have an attachment to. And yeah, Bigfoot was distinct for me in my path to being a brewer because of the first time I had it. So I was living in Pittsburgh. I graduated Penn State with a business degree. I was working at a homebrew shop, just saving money so I could move and get the hell out of Dodge. If I had enough money to buy craft beer, I would go down to the local beer distributor. And this is 1990, 91, 92 in there. And, there weren't a ton of choices. And there were some great Pittsburgh craft beers, Penn Brewery, some other neat little things. But Sierra Nevada, to get your hands on that was a big deal. And of course, Pale Ale was around, but I used to be able to get cases of Sierra Nevada Porter with those blue labels. And it was just, there was something about that beer that just lit me up. I loved it. And so one night we're out with friends. I was out with friends and we were, we're pretty loaded. And we went into this bar and I was extremely thirsty and I needed something quenching. And I saw Sierra Nevada. I'd never heard of Bigfoot, but I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try Sierra Nevada Bigfoot. I had no idea what I was getting. I think I was still in college at this time because I hadn't been working at the homebrew shop yet. I took I am so high and thirsty, I need a cold, refreshing beer kind of chug of a Bigfoot. And then I came up for air and was just like, oh my God, what the hell? And I actually gave it to the guy that was sitting at the bar. I was like, this is not the beer I thought I was getting. But it left a mark on me. So I went back when I was sober a day or two later and I got a pour of it. And that was a moment that really changed what I could even think that a hoppy beer was. I mean, when I was in college, a hoppy beer was going to get Bass Ale, which if you've had a Bass Ale in the last 20 years, they like wave hops over top of it compared to IPAs nowadays. So when I tried that Bigfoot, it was a punch to the brain and locked in my brain like, wow, the flavors that are possible with a hoppy and big and malty strong beer like that. So absolutely. Was that an inspiration for Heady Topper? I mean, there were a lot of things that were an inspiration for Heady Topper, but that was a pivotal moment of like the first real wow moment with a hoppy, bold beer. And of course, it came out of California, you know?
Mm-hmm. And then Celebration, oh my gosh,
They're
always
winner.
so
Oh.
excited. And we just had Celebration recently, and it was still really
Sure.
good.
And I have other memories of when I was at the Seven Barrel Brewery. This was 1994, maybe. I was waiting tables and I was working for free with the brewer. Our late friend Paul White was the head brewer. I was working 5 days a week waiting tables. I would go in on my days off and work for free in the brewery. And I did that for a year. One of the cool things that happened in that year was Catamount Brewing, which was just over the river from West Lebanon in White River Junction, Vermont, that brought Todd Mott and other really talented brewers out of that brewery. They would come over on bottling day sometimes to the brew pub, to the Seven Barrel Brewery with seconds. And I remember the first year they came in with a hoppy Christmas ale of theirs. And that was another one that was like, wow, wow, wow. You know, I mean, just these different things coming in from the strangest places, but it was those early pioneers on what eventually became the world of IPA now.
Thank you. Great story. Ken, passing it over to you.
Well, if you can believe it, it's been almost an hour as we are going to be kind of wrapping everything up, making sure we tie a nice bow on this great episode. John and Jen, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. As we end every single episode, all of us come in with a final question. This final question is meant to be fun, lighthearted, and just a way to show a little bit more of your personality, which you guys have shown plenty of tonight. So I'm expecting to be even more entertaining. Wendy, what is your final question for John and Jen here?
So November is your 20th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
So
this is our 20th year. Exciting.
I've read that you release an anniversary beer every year. Have you announced what your anniversary beer is going to be this year?
We've only done one anniversary beer, actually.
Okay.
It was for our 15th, and that was a barrel-aged Luscious. So we have some fun ideas that we are not ready to reveal yet.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the Alchemist family is going to have a hell of a time on November 29th. We're going to have an amazing internal employee party celebration kind of thing. There is going to be a beer release for that, but we're not ready to tell anybody about it. But it's going to be really delicious and fun.
We love parties. That's probably what keeps us going more than anything. Having parties with our staff, our friends. It's the best thing.
And the harder you work, I mean, you realize you need to take those moments in life to just like shut it down and have fun and put things in perspective and not take it so seriously.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Dan, what is your final question for John and Jen here?
All right, real quick. I do want to give a shout out for the beer you sent here from Vermont to Phoenix. Got here yesterday afternoon. It was still cold. So nice. Shout out to that. That was a great job. That's the first time that's ever happened. This is just a fun question. No right or wrong answer, but just want to throw it out there. If you didn't know, in 2015, Iron Maiden released a song called The Alchemist. Did they name this song after your brewery? And if not, do you still tell people they named it after you anyways?
That'd be really cool if they did. I know a friend of ours named Kieran that his head would explode if he ever thought that they had named anything after us, because that is his all-time favorite band. No, I do not think I can't imagine that there's any connection, but I will say that we had the opportunity to meet Scott Ian of Anthrax.
Oh, hell yeah.
And we had seen, he had made an Instagram post. Somebody had given him some Heady Topper for his birthday, and he made a post about it. And so we saw him. We happened to be out in California. We saw him at a party, and I just beelined it for him and walked right up to him. I was like, "Hey, Scotty." And I said, "I'm John Kimmich." I said, "I make Heady Topper." And he was like, "What?" You know, I mean, it was so cool. And eventually, me, our son Charlie, and Kieran, the three of us got to go backstage at the Heavy Montreal Festival a few years ago when Anthrax and Slayer were playing, and we got to stand right behind the soundboard and watch Anthrax's set. So that was pretty cool.
Man, I need to know what kind of parties you guys are going to. If you're hanging out with Scott Ian, that's actually pretty amazing.
We've been able to meet lots of cool people because of Heady Topper. So it's been a pretty crazy ride.
Obviously,
but we're just here doing our thing in Vermont.
The top of the list of the cool people are the hosts of the Better on Draft podcast. So we appreciate that lead in, because I know that's where you were going with that. There's
the pyramid goes down from there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Exactly. We're way
cool
above.
People.
We're way above.
You and Bernie Madoff are up at the top, and it all goes down.
Hold on.
I feel like do we have 2 minutes? What is a story with Bernie Madoff and the Alchemist beer? Because I need to know now.
No, Bernie.
No, you're at the top of the pyramid. It's a
just
pyramid.
Like Bernie Madoff.
Oh,
just
it's
like him.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I am
only Bernie we know is Bernie Sanders.
Wait, do you have a Bernie Sanders Alchemist story or a Heady Topper story?
Hold on. She's going to. She's going to grab something real quick.
Is that Bernie's? Yeah.
All right. Yes, if you guys aren't watching, real quick, if you guys are listening via the podcast, go over to our YouTube page, youtube.com/BetterOnDraft. On it, which you will see, Jen is showing, and she will explain what she's showing.
There you go.
Bernie Sanders recognized us, and we are in the congressional record in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So pretty cool for our leadership championing workers' rights. Paid sick leave and paid family leave. Thank you, Bernie.
It's pretty incredible.
And one of the cool things about living in a state the size of Vermont is that you can actually access your elected officials in an amazing level. So it's really cool.
All right. My final question is, a little bit fun. While you are in the brew house, what kind of music's playing? What's going on the loudspeakers while you guys are brewing beer over there in Vermont?
That depends. That's a tricky tug and pull at the Alchemist. The Waterbury Brewery is wired for sound, and so there's constant battles over the music. Some days I go in there and I'm ashamed of what's playing on those speakers, but other days it's okay and it's to my liking. Here in Stowe, we kind of eliminated that because really, it's my opinion, when you're in the act of brewing, your first line of defense is your ears. So if a pump sounds wrong or if a gas valve sounds wrong, these things, you need to kind of be in tune with things. In my younger years, I used to, of course, blast heavy, angry music and a lot of Howard Stern. I found Howard was a much more suitable thing because it's more of a reasonable conversation in the room and you're still in tune with your things. I would blast, heavy music on my mash-ins, but then I would settle into conversation. With that said, High on Fire just played down in Brattleboro, and I took a crew of my brewers and canning line guys down to see them in a place called Stone Church, which is an old Catholic church that is now a music venue. And as somebody that barely escaped being raised Catholic, it was pretty cool sitting in the front row of the balcony watching Matt Pike and High on Fire tear the roof off the place. So it was pretty cool.
Well, I guess I'll reword the question a little bit. Just for you two, I should say, because you mentioned that you guys were in basically the entire industry, restaurant, beer, you're in the kitchen. I've been in plenty of kitchens before, and I've heard everything from NWA to Taylor Swift, from the heaviest of rock where you can't even understand what they're screaming, to BB King. What are you listening to when you're in the kitchen?
Gosh, we've had kitchen staff with heavy metal, this and that. What I have found for our staff, both in our public space here and what we ended up with our kitchen when we had it, it's got to be down tempo. It's just got to have a beat that you can work to, whether it's down tempo, hip hop or jazz or whatever. I think that's what's most effective. And, we have a pretty good curated list here in our public space, but I feel like we went through this whole thing in our kitchen where it was heavy metal and we ended up with a jazz, something that's not going to make your brain explode or throw a frying pan at a server,
I will say, Jen and I see a ton of live music all the time. It's one of our passions. Our new most favorite artist, Mono Neon. If you don't know him, look him up because he's from another galaxy. I'm convinced.
All right, well, that is going to do it. Episode 315 in the books of the Better on Draft podcast. John and Jen, Alchemist beer. Obviously, they can get it at the breweries. Any distro, anywhere not brewery that they can get your guys' beer? I know not in Michigan, but...
Yeah, absolutely. No. we distribute all through the state of Vermont, Heady Topper and Focal Banger. And then we do seasonal drops in some other key areas, New York City, California. We have a few spots, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Philadelphia. We do a few throughout the year. So we drop and it's fresh and it goes within a week. We're not like keeping it on shelves.
It's we'll package it on a Tuesday. It'll get on the truck on a Wednesday. It'll be hitting shelves in LA on a Friday and be gone by Monday. So
it's good for us because we make the same amount of beer year round. So when we have mud season and our retail slows down here in Stowe, that's when we do our drops and it keeps everyone employed year round.
Once again, thank you so much. You can find us on all of our social medias. That's Twitter, Untapped, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, Facebook. It's all Better on Draft. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.